Oh yeah, only one person. Oh, there's a bunch of you guys. Can we spam it with emotes? He came at the right time. I don't know if you guys are ready though. All right, let's bring him on. The conductor, Jason, is ready to bring on Codingo. Alright, let's fix this audio and make sure you guys could hear Codingo properly. There we go. That should do it. I'm gonna rejoin this to see if the audio works. The audio channels. Don't need that. And join. Yep, it works. Alright, so whenever Codingo joins, we'll get this started. It should be done here in a sec. There we go. That's done. Cool. I think he's probably getting ready to jump on. Let's give him a few minutes. He's in the chat, so he's probably listening to all these. I'm doing this thing like exam, stuck on the last challenge, and still don't know what are the 3 things that you're good. I'm not sure if I understand what your question is. Alright, it looks like Codingo's gonna jump on. Codingo Lang. Volume's low for what? What volume's low? Hey,
Oh,
how you doing?
can you hear me?
I can absolutely hear you.
Awesome. Sorry about that. 2FA issues.
It makes sense. It's all good, but let's make sure. Chat, can you hear Codingo properly before I bring him on? Say hi if you hear him.
Test.
Yep. My voice is low apparently, so I'm gonna bump me a little bit. Do I sound better, chat? I don't know how mine got lower because of. Oh, I know why. Hold on. There we go. All right, fixed it. How you doing, my friend? So before we get into the interview, I want to get this out of the way and say you and I have never had the pleasure to meet. This is the first time we actually are talking outside of a Slack and DM conversation. But it's very obvious that we both have something very in common, something very important in common. I think you like Recon as much as I do, and you also have a very good. You have a passion for education. I've seen some of the stuff that you've inspired me to do with Pentesting Lab as well. But before we jump into all of that, I want to say thank you for taking the time to join. I know it's pretty late for you, and I really appreciate you being on here. But give us a quick intro. Who are you? For people that don't know who you are for some reason, what do you do currently, and how long have you been in the bounty space?
Okay. Bug bounty space about 2 years. Security a bit longer. I was a pen tester before it. Like I got into bounties to get into pen testing, left it alone for a while, but took it a lot more seriously the last 2 years. Currently the global head of security operations for Bugcrowd. So essentially I manage the triage team there. Been doing that for about 2 months. So went from hunting to kind of jumping on the other side.
And how does that how does the hunting, because like one of the things that I ask people that are on both sides of it, right, is being a bug bounty hunter, how does it help you in your day-to-day job? Whether you're, for your case, you work with researchers, you work with researchers, and having the experience as a researcher yourself, I'm sure that's really valuable to understand where they're coming from, what their expectations are, and how to approach them better, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's, I mean, we've got a lot of hunters or ex-hunters, that have jumped in at some point. It does limit your hunting severely. So I haven't been hunting since I joined this side, but I get to yield that experience sometimes. So where someone's done an XSS alert one, I'm like, oh no, this could be leveraged, and jump in a ticket, do it a bit further.
Nice.
I think that having that knowledge kind of lets you see the whole picture a bit more, and you can empathize more with the situation.
And what made the change? What made you want to be on the? Because I think like one of the things that I
Yeah.
struggle with, like to be honest, like one of the things that I struggle with is like the FOMO of all this, right? The fear of missing out. Because once you're
Mm.
attached to a brand, like you're attached to Bugcrowd, I'm attached to HackerOne. It makes a little bit of a, the hacking becomes harder because when you're on Bugcrowd, you can't hack as much as you used to on the platform. And same thing with me when I'm on HackerOne. Some programs, like including Verizon Media, I can't hack on because of policies we have in place. What
Yeah. Same.
knowing
I mean, much the same.
knowing those happening to you, like what made you want to make the change, the shift to go from being on the hacker end of it to the supporting and helping the hackers on the platform end?
I mean, it wasn't quick for me actually. It was about a year. So I know Casey pretty well, and he and I were talking on and off for about a year before I decided to jump. I think for me, it's a way I wanted to leave a mark on it, and I think managing triage and getting to push the game there, it felt like the best way I could do that essentially. And then the other side of it, I was a pen tester, and for lack of a better term, got disillusioned with that style of testing. I don't think it makes security as good. I can qualify that as we get into it because I know that can be a bit of a heated statement. But much like a couple of the people I've hired to join my team from that space, I felt like Bug Bounties was doing more to raise the bar, and I wanted to be at the front of that as much as I could.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with this is nothing against pen testers at all. Like I'm not saying this to be malicious in any way, but I think I absolutely agree. Bug bounties have pushed the entire industry from a security perspective to a different shift. Like there's a ton of cool research coming out of bug bounties. There's a ton of good write-ups, cool techniques, new vuln types coming out of just people doing it with bug bounties.
Yeah, I mean there's each has its place, but I think pen testing's the majority of pen testing work currently is external web app assessment. So I was a fully remote pen tester as a big part of my day. It just isn't meeting the same bar at nowhere near.
So let me understand. You did pen test before you did bug bounties, or you did bug bounties and then got into pen test?
So I did. So I was a software developer at the time, and I did bug bounties to prove I had the knowledge. I was struggling to break in, and I'd done internal security where I was, but I didn't have an entitle or anything like that. So I hunted essentially to get in, and then I used it when I was a pen tester just to keep pushing myself and improving. Writing tools is much easier when you've got an asset you can write it against. So I'd use bug bounties for that as well. So I'd say I was a bounty hunter first, but it's really only the last 2 years that I've taken it to some sort of rigor and structure around it.
Do you think like doing these bug bounty engagements, like doing it on your own, being a bug bounty hacker, for you, someone who's done bug bounties to go to become a pen tester, did it help in any way? Did it help you with the resume? How did it help you land like a job? The message I'm trying to get out is mostly like, how does it help you professionally when you do bug bounties?
Yeah, I mean, for joining Bugcrowd, it helped a lot. So, for jumping to pen testing, it helped with the right firms. I struggled for about 2 years to get into pen testing. Largely, pen testing is the hardest end of the market to jump straight to, and that was essentially what I did. And I mean, in a way, it was a filter. Like I joined NCC Group, and they cared a heck of a lot about like experience and what I'd done, where there were other places that were a lot, and like I'd done my OSCP and pre-studied and stuff, but a lot of places cared, oh, you don't have CEH or you haven't done this management thing. And so in many respects, finding the firms that cared about bug bounties was my way of filtering, where do I want to go?
Well, you said something about OSCP and CEH. You said you have your OSCP already?
Yeah, so I've never done the exam, but I've done the labs extensively.
Cool.
I, at the time, was pretty anti certifications and tried to do it without actually finishing them. So I've done the exam, but never completed the report behind it. Just kind of funny. I wrote Reconnoiter for all of that. So I've got a pretty popular OSCP tool, but I've been thinking about jumping back now that they've got the V2 and C, because a lot of my disdain for it at the time was the lack of web and the lack of like Active Directory and stuff like that.
How did that help you with bug bounties? Like, did it help you? Because there's a lot of there's a mixed signal that comes from certificates, right? There's a group of people that say you don't need any certificates to do bug bounties, And there's a group that says, OSCP will help you in some ways. It helps you with the attacker mentality, but it doesn't
Yeah,
really qualify you to do bug bounties, right?
yeah. I mean, it's thought. I mean, even the new version still. I don't know. I have to look at it, but I would say. I would say that OSCP focuses on the wrong end of security to be directly relevant for bug bounties, except it does teach you how to think, how to enumerate and dig deeper. If your core focus was, hey, I want to be successful at bug bounties, I think you're probably better off just jumping in, watching things like this, your stream, and doing Pentester Lab and focusing really deeply on web than going down the OSCP path.
Do you worked with any other certificates? Have you done any of the e-learn security stuff, or you said C8? Someone was asking you about. I don't agree with CH just to get out of the way.
Nah.
Like, no CH. I don't think it does anything, but I want to hear your take on it as well.
No, I think CEH is garbage. You could study for that thing in a week and do a multiple choice exam. It doesn't represent the mindset or at all. It's corporate. It's a corporate certificate. The only reason I think to do it is if you're working for the DID and you require it. I've poked around a lot. I've got most of the e-learn certs I've bought at one time or another and gone over the labs and such. The reason I give away Pentester Lab so much is I think it's the best resource for quickly skilling up. So I did the CTF badge on there, and that forced me to go deeper than any cert has.
Really?
Yeah, it's quite a challenging one. It's got like Loon and stuff like that in there. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce that. LUHN. So there's some really good challenges there.
Very cool. What sparked all the Pentester Lab giveaways? Because I saw like at one point you were giving out maybe like 500 of them, or some crazy amount one day. What sparked all of that?
Yeah, I worked out last year there was 20,000 that I gave away. I didn't pay for all of that, and people helped me with giveaways and stuff, but $20,000 worth.
Holy shit. That's a lot of Pentester.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's because it's a great resource to get someone started. You can give them a month, and it's not such a high bar that they can't renew it if they're still enjoying it or still getting a lot out of it. And it just focuses on pure, here's your challenge. Here, you have to go and learn about this. It's not. I don't know. It cuts straight through the bullshit and gets down to getting you started.
Do you outside of like Pentester Lab, do you do any CTFs? Like, do you play CTFs regularly, or did you at least do CTFs at some point?
I used to. I helped to build the Recon CTF. So I've built them, which was a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work to build a CTF.
Of course.
And I always mean to, when I go to a B-sides, jump in and do the CTF, but I always get stuck with Recon and end up doing it. So,
but before any of this, what I'm trying to get at is like, do you play CTFs as a way to learn or as a way to get better or sharpen up your skills? Do you recommend people doing CTFs? Because I think like some of the CTFs are, they're very unrealistic sometimes, right? So it doesn't make sense for.
Yeah, I think it depends. Depends what it is. So right. I don't really do that. I know some people that do. So like SML 555 Prodigy SML as well. I know he did a lot of CTFs and learned a lot that way. So it's not to discount it as a way. And for me personally, I've usually sat down and tried to write a tool to solve a problem. So that's how vhost scan was born. Was like, I want to understand virtual hosts, so I'll write a tool to discover them. I found that was the way that I kind of understood things a bit more.
So but the reason why I ask all this question is there's a large number of people that are coming into bug bounties on a daily basis. People from zero background in tech or in web engineering or whatever you want to call it, to people that have sysadmin or some engineering, some IT help desk background, and they want to get started in bug bounties. Right? Pentester Lab, great resource. CTFs in some cases, it's good to go after and learn some realistic CTFs maybe. CTF challenge, HackerOne 101. These are the certificates that are built for bug bounty hunters, right? But what are some resources you would, there's Bugcrowd University as well. Besides the three that I just named, what other resources do you recommend to new hackers to go after if they wanted to get started and learn, to sharpen up their skills, to get better, or just get started in bug bounties?
I think, so anything Jason Haddock's, the bug hunters methodology stuff.
1, 2, 3, and the fourth one's coming out soon.
That's it, exactly. And then also, I think just community, just getting involved. So Twitter, for all its flaws, is a great way to understand community and jump in, and GitHub as well. So I use GitHub follows and GitHub stars a lot. I did that from the beginning to now, just to find new tools, find new techniques, and see where people are shifting. Because the trouble with a lot of, I mean, not so much like the dynamic content we've got now with videos and streams, but if you're going through written content, it severely outdates itself quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, or it teaches you the wrong thing. So like if you're learning XSS, everything's going to teach you how to pop an alert box, even though that's the last thing you want to be doing on a bug bounty, because you want to try and explore it first. But it'll start with teach you how to pop an alert one, because that's the easiest thing to teach in a standardized format.
All right. Do you recommend, on the topic of like doing the alert ones, do you recommend bug bounty hackers to go further than just popping an alert one?
Yeah, totally. So I keep meaning to write a blog article about this, and I've picked on this in a ton of conference talks. The alert one to an account takeover can sometimes be the difference between like a couple $100 and a couple $1,000. One example, on a program last year, I had 5,000 with a 2,000 reporting bonus on an account takeover that duped against someone who did an alert one, but they paid me anyway because I did the full attack chain. So that person got $200 and I got 7,000. There's a massive difference in how you approach it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the newer hackers, a different story. Like, they're still learning. Oh, you do alert one makes sense. You're still learning how to answer, right? But I think with some of the top hackers, I think and I don't know if it's a good way. It's a good assumption, but I think the assumption is that the team knows enough about XSS to understand what the impact of it is, right? In case of like Verizon Media, Google, Tesla, it makes sense. But I don't think it makes sense from the junior teams, right?
I think it matters because it goes beyond the security team. So if you do a page redress and the security team needs to go to the development team to get them to take it seriously, and then you're assuming the development team needs to roadmap this. So having done Scrum plans and things like that, it's a lot easier if there's impact there. So if you were to do a page redress, just as a simpler point, because you can do a bulk standard payload for that, it will make a significant difference in the dialogue to a non-technical audience than it will if it's just pop in alert box. Because you can justify in the report, I could do this and this and this. But if you have some sort of visual demonstration, it does make a pretty big difference.
Yeah, that's a valid point. I've had similar experiences. This is actually on a Bugcrowd program a few years ago. I sent a bunch of XSS to this program, right? And the last XSS I ever sent to this program was a account takeover, because I wanted to report the fact that, and this is not really XSS, I wanted to report the fact that on an email change, they wouldn't ask for a password. Most companies that go, that's, sure, we'll fix it, P3 maybe at most. But if you change that with an XSS, when you change a user's email and then you hit the forget password right away on their box, it elevates the XSS from, the XSS and the no password requirement on email change to a complete account takeover, which goes to a P1, P2 on Bugcrowd, right? I totally understand that part of it, but I think you're absolutely right. There should be a POC that kind of shows a bigger impact rather than alert one, because it absolutely does make a difference when it comes down to payments.
I think it's the fundamentals of bug bounty, though, is writing around impact and not writing around bug classes. Bug classes are how we communicate to each other. Right. Impact is how you communicate with the team.
What would you recommend to hackers that are, there's a bunch of hackers that everybody that starts with bug bounties, I feel like they go after XSS, IDLER, and CSRF. The people that actually want to try it. They don't, the people that actually want to try, because there's people that, start with missing best practices, missing headers. I'm not dealing with that. I don't care about that bucket of people, because you're not, you're just going for the easy stuff. But what do you recommend for people that are finding XSS? What did you recommend for them to look at for their XSS to go from a P3, P4 to a P2 or a P1 to get a max payout? What things should they try when they find XSS?
Yeah, so account chaining. I mean, so if you find an XSS, the first check should always be, do you need the old password for a new password? Can I turn that into an account takeover? If you can turn it into an account takeover, can you enumerate all usernames on an endpoint? So in theory, that this could be an account takeover for site-wide, because that's going to be the defining point for a P1 is, a report written on impact saying, hey, I could send this link to all these users that I can discover this way, and anyone who clicks it or reset their password has a lot of practical risk behind it, as opposed to a single account takeover where you're kind of relying on the phishing argument.
Yeah, very true.
It's looking for not so much further technical hooks, but what's the impact of your XSS? Is it a medical system where it could, manipulate someone's record and history of, their account, and writing around that as opposed to writing around the endpoint that the XSS discovers on, I think is the key to it.
That's a very valid point. I think I'm gonna try and take their approach and go back to the programs that I submitted XSS to, and see how many XSS I can find again, and chain it to a account takeover and compare the two payments and see if they pay more because of that. Because I'll be genuinely curious to see how many programs actually want that kind of stuff. Because again, my assumption is always, not always, with most of the teams, again with the bigger teams, was they're gonna go and investigate this. But I'm starting to learn more and more that you're absolutely right. Like when it comes down to showing the impact, I think maybe having some sort of an account takeover for one of your XSS would help you get paid for all the other ones, even in a higher rate.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's also makes it easier to triage. And I've had multiple times where my XSS is a dupe, but it's been triaged anyway because it's got that extra element to it. Which is also, I mean, that takes the right program to fly and usually experience with the program, but it's still great when it happens.
Let's talk about something completely different. Recon. And before we get into the Recon part, let's talk about, what does Recon mean to you? And yeah, when someone says Recon, what does it mean to you? And when you do Recon, what does it mean to you?
So, I mean, it's understanding a target properly, understanding what they do, understanding where they're at. For me, Recon's a iterative thing, so I tend to take it a bit of a hybrid approach. I think there's this division in community these days, or more so last year, where everyone's either a deep dive or a Recon person. It's just kind of bullshit for the most part, because the best point you can set is in the middle. Is essentially, for me, I'll Recon a program as deep as I can, and then I'll monitor for points of change to know where to look. So instead of mapping the external perimeter of a program, I want to understand what's the team they're working on, what do they care about. Okay. So if there's a development website and then I get an alert that it's changed, or I re-enumerate and I see it's changed, then I know that there's more chance that I'm going to find something there that someone hasn't found. I'm less likely to dupe in an area that's actively being worked on. And I also know that when the team receives that report, they're going to care more about it because it's front of mind work for them. It's not something from 3-4 years ago that they're going to archive it off and not care as much. And so I think Recon for me is both limiting my duplicate pop opportunities as well as understanding what the team cares about.
What do you use for as far as Recon tools go? Like, let's talk about from asset discovery to content discovery. How does that look for you? What kind of tools do you use? What is the high level workflow for you when you do Recon? Let's say we have Tesla.com example. Like I said, Tesla.com. Let's say Tesla.com launches tomorrow. It's a brand new program. We're going to say Tesla, for example. They give you the domain Tesla.com and they tell you you're going to go run Recon. How does that look high level?
So I have a pretty big custom stack, which is not the best example. Okay. But a lot of that leverages, to be somewhat controversial, I use FFuff over dir. I have a custom tool that I'll drop today that I use as a first pass for that. Okay. And then, so I teamed up last year with HackLuke and SML555. Similar to kind of the disturbance approach, but we wrote, so each of us came from a software dev background and each of us became pen testers. And we essentially sat down, we're like, well, how do we write an engine to just track everything? And so we wrote an engine that would sit over the top of 100 separate VPS instances and just make the most of any tool we found by running it at scale. So that allowed us to track at the time 5.6 million domains using really reasonable large Django modules and using RabbitMQ for managing queues and things like that. Nice. But we wrapped it around the best tools we could find. So like DNSgrep was a great first pass for can we quickly get Rapid7 data, and then having a box that just automatically maintains and updates that. For a long time, we used Subfinder and Amass, but I've kind of gone in a different direction for that, which I'm not sure about releasing yet. I think I will because I'm not hunting these days. I'm on the other side. but I haven't done that yet. But I'd split myself into writing a lot of distinct sources for that so I could move more at scale. We had a lot of problems with Subfighter on a mass updating and breaking flow. So, swapping into more direct access there. And then I have a DNS brute forcer as well that I've written that I want to get out there, but I haven't yet. That also allowed us to find a lot of content quickly.
Very cool. And what do you do as far as, so that was, so let's say you get, all these different tools that you mentioned, you run them, you get a list of domains. Where to next? How do you parse that data? You have, let's say you have 250 domains listed. Where to next? Do you screenshot? Do you brute force the directories immediately? How does that look?
So the first point is the first point is capture. The second point is monitor, and then alerts pop off there. So subdomain takeover checks in the first pass as the easier, lower hanging fruit kind of exists, and and then monitoring like so capturing content length, doing things like Levenstein algorithm. There's an example of that in the vhost scan project on my GitHub, but Levenstein allows you to measure the percentage difference in text. So you can just capture the response to a request and use Levenstein to capture how much drift a site has in HTML response. So if a page is dynamic because it's got the time or something on there, or it's just a dynamic JavaScript, you can still use Levenstein to see where the point of change is. And then, new pages and different points of enumeration that come up, you want to know about those things so you can look at them. So it tends to be, I tend to not take the approach of a first pass, look for a target, dive in. I tend to take the approach of track everything, track it again next week, now diff it off and see where are the points I want to look at. I think there's a good example of this Ed Overflow once published using Git and GitHub specifically to track these points of change. I think it's called the Poor Man's Bug Bounty Toolkit or something to that effect. I'm sure someone can put it in chat and would know what I mean.
Ed's also watching. I'm sure he's going to drop a note here in a sec.
Oh, good. Yeah. So that it's essentially that concept wrapped up in a larger scale, but the same kind of hunting principle of tracking points of change so you can look for points of impact.
Let's talk about vhost scan because you mentioned that a few times. How did that idea come up? Why is it so important to also do vhost scans?
So that's born of OSCP and Hack the Box, actually. I did bank on Hack the Box back in the day, and I just miserably failed at it. Largely because at the time there wasn't a good virtual host scanning tool, and I wasn't really thinking about it. It's embarrassing how long it took me, that box, but I was chatting to Tim Kent, Tim K, a friend of mine, about it, and we were like, oh, well, we could write a tool because we were looking for something to write. And so we wrote a tool just to capture every point that we could on virtual host scanning. I don't use it as much these days. I do use FFuff for a lot of that now for most fuzzing activities. But at the time, it was born from, if I'm on a internal engagement as a pen tester, I want to just blast a tool at the whole CIDR range. How am I going to do it? And so vhost scan does 3 separate checks. It does a hash comparison as your first low-hanging fruit, easy pass. And then it'll do Levenstein for your distance checks to see if there is dynamic vhost, because nothing at the time. So if you use Burp Intruder or the Nmap NSE, none of that allowed you to find dynamic vhosts. So we got to clean up for a while, finding virtual hosts that people hadn't, just by nature of having a new trick in the toolkit. And it was a good one just to kind of push my Python knowledge a bit as well.
Have you came across a lot of successful vhost scanning with bug bounties?
In the past, yes, but there's not many. So it was more that first easy round. There's a couple of key programs where once we knew the format, you could change. So vhost scan has a %s in the word list. You can put the host name. Mm-hmm. And there was one particular program where that trick was really, really good. Not so much in the second half of last year. In the first half of last year, I was finding a lot, but it was also like front focus. I was looking at, actually, sorry, 2 years ago, more front of mind focus for me. And then I kind of shifted to the software dev hunting approach a bit more.
Yeah, I've seen less and less of those, but I sometimes, depending on the company, you see it coming up once in a while.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to see if other bug bounty hunts have the same,
If you find one, you should go blasting. And that's essentially, the approach I would take to it is look on a first target if you find one, then go over the entire asset space.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I haven't. Do you do it at scale? Before I ask this, do you do this at scale? Like for not a bug not a pen test engagement for bug bounties? Do you sit there and have a script that goes through every single one of these IP addresses and just blast with hundreds of domains at a scale like that?
Yeah, essentially. So you can wrap vhost scan. There's an example on the Docker. You can wrap it up with interlace. So you can use interlace to pass a target list and then run vhost scan over it and grep off the results.
I will be honest, and I will confess that I don't do vhost scans, and I'm gonna try this now. I've gone after vhost on the IP addresses before because I could just because example, I got a Jira access on some site, Bugcrowd account. I think you probably see some chatter about it before, but one of these and Hadix knows what program this is. This program I did it once, and I couldn't hit the Jira instance, and I keep getting bugged because it was a WAF issue. Sure enough, curl the IP address, give it the Jira subdomain, load it immediately. But I've never gone after scanning at a scale like that. And that's why I was curious to ask: is it worth just adding that aspect into your recon and just having a bug spin up and just do all these to that target, one by one?
I think it is because most people don't understand it, so most people don't look at it. So it's worth doing. And then for someone who doesn't understand what a virtual host is, understanding more about it, because as a pen tester it comes up quite a bit as well, because it's a lot more common on an internal network than an external one. So
fair enough. I gotta try. I'm gonna try this week. I'm gonna write a script and just mass scan every site that I've scanned in the past with vhost scanner and see where it takes me, and I'm gonna let you know if I find it because of it. That'll be fun. It would be a fun experiment to do. Let's talk about something. Let's move on a little bit more from Recon and talk about one of the things that you brought up was you come from a software development background. And I'm curious to understand, does it help at all with doing bug bounties? And if it does, how? And how much does it help, having that background?
So I have two pieces to my background that help. So I was a professional poker player for roughly 7 years before software dev.
Holy crap. Yeah, I want to know more about that now.
Yeah. So there's both the poker. So I've got this weird talk I want to do. I'll divert for a sec.
Let's do it.
I really want to talk at one point. Now we're in the virtual conference space. Right. I want to do a presentation virtually whilst I 6-table poker, just as how poker taught me to think about bug bounties. Because essentially poker is making decisions on incomplete information. And that's the same. It's informed decisions on incomplete information, but it's the same for security. And software development taught me how things are kind of put together. And poker taught me how to kind of take those little pieces and think about them and just trust in action. I tend to overthink things a lot, and I kind of and see, I'm overthinking now. It's by nature of doing, I've played 6-7 million hands of poker pretty easily. It's probably a lot more than that. It allowed me to kind of rigorously learn, okay, you've got to make a decision on the fly. You've got 10 seconds to do this, go. And that's a lot of bounties is, you recon, you move to the next thing, you're constantly iterating and thinking, where the software dev experience taught me how to, understand why certain decisions are made. There's an instinct as a software dev when you're hacking, you see, one mistake, you kind of learn how the team could be operating and start to pull in other directions. Like if you find a character input flaw and it suggests they're not using an ORM, you're going to blast that application for SQL injection. And I think that allows you to move quicker.
So for somebody who's getting started in bug bounties, do you think having a programming background or knowledge a requirement?
No, absolutely not. I think anyone can jump in. You could jump in tomorrow, find new targets and go looking for DMARC or SPF. I mean, it's not the greatest starting point, but you could teach someone that in a day. Likewise, I think anyone could be looking for XSS over programs with a month of just understanding and learning. It certainly, I think it helps if you're, particularly the style of hunting you and I do, where you want to apply something at scale, having the software dev background to allow you to right around that is useful, like all the shell stuff that you've done. It allows you. I mean, it's not that it's a barrier, but it allows you to work more effectively with your time.
Yeah, the thing that I've done with like shell, I don't regret it necessarily putting it out there. I don't think it's the most efficient way of doing recon. It's not how I do my recon, but the point was ad hoc. I just have a company that dropped. I have no clue how to do any of this. Can I put 4 different different tools together that gets all the job done, and it gives the basics for me to focus on doing bug bounty hunting without having to focus on screenshots and going to every website manually and all that. And the point was to show people it's not that hard to write your own scripts like that and have it run. Everybody has scripts. No one wants to share them because they're embarrassed of their code. The point is it works. If it works for you, who cares?
This is what I like about Tom Nom Nom when you see him like chaining tools and doing things, and it's yeah, but I mean, same as you said, you didn't like putting it out there. That's the reservation I always have is, it's not the best way to do it. Or I look at someone like Tom Nom Nom or Iceman or someone who's done like this incredible work, and I'm like, well, I don't feel right about putting this out. It's I've got so many tools I've been meaning to release that I over polish and overthink. Like I've got a DNS brute forces that I've written in C++, blows Mascan out of the water. I think it can do what it does in 6 hours in about 6 minutes by distributing it. But I know that Donuts is better. I had drinks with him in San Francisco, and like even though his isn't out there, it's like that imposter syndrome kick of I don't feel like I should release because there's a better way to do this, and I don't know what it is yet.
See, the funny thing is, like, he feels the same way about his code as a thing. Like, like, it's the same thing. We all say, like, Donut wrote this thing, and apparently he's rewriting it right now, according to X. But, like...
He's writing it in Rust. He's a beast. I'm like, I wrote mine in C++, and I still think Rust is insane. That's a whole other level of commitment.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, man, like the point, like for me at least, I'm not a programmer at all. Like I did bug bounties and hacking first, and then I learned everything that I needed to learn because I learned like how do I do this? Like how do I learn SQL because I want to learn SQL injection. I want to take a SQL class in college. How do I do this? I want to take a class in college again. I took that approach. Like I learned these things in hacking, and I want to learn more about it. But the point was, hey, like you can put stuff together. You don't have to rewrite everything on your own. As far as you understand how these tools work and why they work, you can always chain them together and find a way to use them together to find bugs and better your approach.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I don't know, it should never be a barrier to releasing, but somehow it becomes one.
You said something about C++, and I know you mentioned you were releasing a tool today. It was a Recon tool. I'm curious to hear more about it. What is the tool about? How does it work? And when does it get released?
I'll do that now. I'll release it while we talk. So this is where the imposter syndrome kicks. So this takes the same approach that Meg and Meg Plus took to. Okay. So my first pass. Hang on, I'm failing at multitasking. I'll quickly make it public. So I made a tool called Crit Hit to essentially allow me to do a first pass over large targets. Same approach. I didn't actually know Meg and Meg Plus Plus existed. I came to the idea independently, which is where you're onto something, right? I cited it anyway because they were definitely the first movers there. But essentially going over, if I've got 10,000 domains, how can I run a request over every single one of them and get results? But then secondary to that, and the part that this does a bit uniquely, if I find an XSS on a single target, how can I find that in every target in the asset? So I made a concept called signatures around that to allow me to create a signature file, run it over all of those targets and do it. And then as I hit scaling problems, Tom talks about this quite a bit himself. Like there's a whole host of new problems that come when you work at scale. So I've added it so it can support multiple proxy lists and things like that to allow you to do multiple verifications over domains. Because when I was wrapping up things like FFuff and Dirbuster in loops, I found I was losing results just because I'd get like a temporary WAF ban or something to that impact. So its goal is to hopefully, or I've found it fairly successfully, work around that.
Why C++?
So I was a C developer at one point and wanted to not completely lose the skill. And it's just a vanity thing. I tend to write open source in like this tool was never going to go public. which, anything I make public, I tend to do in Python because it lowers the barrier to entry and encourages participation.
Right.
I'm kind of averse to Go for this reason. I find that the projects I've seen in Go get a lot less. There's less contributions and the barrier to entry is a lot higher. And I've found that, if you do something in Python, people can understand it quicker, understand what it does quicker, and also contribute quicker. And so I do tend to do anything public in Python, but then my private stuff I do in other languages just because I enjoy it more and it keeps me motivated.
Do you recommend people to learn Go or Python if I as a new hacker today I want to learn a programming language for scripting and my bug bounty needs? What do you recommend? Go, Python, Ruby?
Python, 100%. I think anyone who's suggesting Go has a bias in the equation. But the reason to go for Python is it's going to be a quicker. It exists everywhere, and it's a quicker tool. I'm like midway through releasing this while we talk. There we go. It allows you. It allows you to jump into more legacy projects quicker because there is a large surface of projects that exist in Python. And if you're writing an exploit for a report as a pen tester and you do it in Python, the team's going to understand and communicate with it more. So if your goal is a career, writing a Golang exploit in a report, I've done that in the past. It never really lands properly. You get too many customers who will ask questions about, oh, how do I run it? How do I do it? If you do something in Python where you wrap a request, you say you found a problem in an API and you want to give them a script to reproduce it on the report, you do that in Python and it lands really well, or PowerShell if it's a Windows dense team. But I think that the reality of language isn't what language is best for the task. In some cases, if your goal is to learn and to use, the reality is what language is going to give me the access to the most knowledge possible. And I think that's Python.
What would you say for someone who, because there's a lot of discussion around like Go is faster, Python is more reliable. What's your take on it? Do you think you can make any of your Python scripts to be as fast as something that's written in Go? Like comparing FUF to directory search, for example. I feel like FUF is a lot faster than dir search does. But I like directory search for just brute forcing directories more than anything else. What is your take on it? Like, what do you think about that?
There's definitely a speed benefit to Python because it's to Golang because it's not an interpreted language. Right. But I think the implementation and the approach matters. So for our bug bounty stack, we use Django to wrap things and just distribute it over multiple VPSs. And I don't think there's a faster engine out there than what Luke Sajib and I wrote. It just, you distribute something over 100 VPSs, you don't care so much about a 10-second delay even. I think the approach matters more than those, that kind of fine tuning. Right. And if the approach is, hey, I want to make an open source tool and I want others to consume it, then the question then is, well, is this something that I'm writing and I want to maintain, and should I do it in Go for that reason? Or is this something I'm going to do in Python so I can have multiple people from multiple backgrounds contribute to it?
Fair enough. Somebody in the chat asked this, and I kind of want to bring this up because this is something that I was working on today. Do you look at GitHub a lot for Recon?
Yeah. Yeah. So you can pinch my watch list. I use GitHub follows and watch. I like to know when different tools have new changes. So for projects that I use, I'll watch them so I can see points of change and new features I should be exploring. And I'll use follows so that, if an author releases something, I can catch it early. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of people that don't publicize tools as much. So if you follow Tom Nom Nom, for example, right, you'll see things that are going up and contributing that you won't see over the Twitterverse, because not everything becomes an independent project. Likewise, if you see 5 different people that you follow start to star something, it's probably something that you should be having a look at.
I think FUF was a great example of that, the starting thing. It started with a few folks really hyping it up, and then I think the entire bug bounty community has fallen in love with FUF or FUF with the starting thing. And that's a really good
way I think
see those trends.
That one's funny because I genuinely think it's the best solution to the problem. I think but it's kind of got this viral element to it where a lot of people can't tell you why. Yep. But for me, it's actively maintained. There's an author behind it that really cares about the tool and is contributing to it. It's my most active repo that I watch, just because he's always in there, he's always doing it, and he's doing it just because he cares. Like I went to donate to him in the early days, he's like, no, I'd rather you just give it to the EFF, because he works for the EFF. And it's just that kind of, like, for me, it's the mentality of the author, the fact that I know it's not going to get, a lot of projects, and I'm guilty of this myself, get built and then don't get maintained very well. And I don't think FFUF is in that bucket. I think it's something that's going to be maintained for the long term.
When it comes down to tools, besides FFUF and things that you have written yourself, any other tools you want to give a shout out to that you think is a great place to, start, or a tool that you really recommend for people to have in their tool belt?
I have to have a look now. Have a quick look. I mean, I use a lot of Tom's stuff. I keep citing that. If I'm kind of happy, it's just, I think that's a lot of community these days. At GF I've used a lot as well, actually, and HTTP probe also.
Yep.
I think even outside of open source, you should always learn how to use what came before bounties. So Nmap, Burp Suite, as much as it's central to the bug bounty universe, is written from the pen testing perspective in the pen testing space. I think learning Burp Suite in detail, learning Burp Suite extensions is really important. Most people make a mistake of learning Burp, adding all these extensions, and kind of stop at that point. I think it's important to get to a point with Burp where you understand what each extension does and you have multiple configuration files. So when I approach Burp Suite, if I'm approaching an ASP target, I've got a config file for that with the extensions that are relevant to ASP. If I'm approaching something and it's a PHP application, it's running LifeRay, I'll load a totally different config file. And that comes from watching the B App Store heavily and watching GitHub for Burp Suite extensions and knowing, what fits in where. But I think that's just as important as monitoring the open source space.
So speaking of Burp, you said you have different configurations and different plugins you use. Any plugins you want to recommend to hackers that they should experiment and learn how to use?
I'd say Freddy for deserialization is pretty useful. I'm trying to think. Freddy's the one that would be most useful. Logger++, just to get better insight into what's happening. They're the ones that tend to make it into all configs for me. I'm not too good on the fly of thinking of this.
Do you use?
I mean, there's some that.
Do you use Burp Suite to? How do you use Burp Suite? Like, do you rely on Burp Suite plugins for a lot of things? Because, like, for example, I'll give you why I asked this question. I just rely on Burp for a couple of things. I just like the decoder tab. It makes my life a little bit easier sometimes. I love the intruder and turbo intruder. It makes the life a lot easier. And then fuzzing and repeater, it just makes more sense. And totally. I don't use a lot of I don't use any active scanner. I don't use a lot of things that find vulnerabilities for you. I use it to make my life easier more than anything, than rely on it for finding me bugs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. But like deserialization, there's a lot of useful extensions. So like Freddy being one of those. I forget Collaborator as well is quite useful if you're testing SSRF and things like that, using an external collaborator server. I think there's a lot of those elements to it. I think, like a lot of people, I'd love to see a competitor to kind of push the bar. I think extensions are great, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. Similar to yourself, extensions there are a foot stop for me, where it's just making sure that I check for things that I wouldn't check for otherwise. So I wrote an extension called Minesweeper because once I was on a pen test and there was a single page with cryptojacking. So one of the interesting education pieces for me was that cryptojacking, so that it's not identified as openly, usually doesn't exist on the front page and usually doesn't exist on every page. If it's via a compromised server, often placed on one high traffic page to limit the chance that it's exposed. So I wrote an extension just to scan over for those whilst I was testing, so I didn't miss it, because I came so close to missing it once. I didn't want that to happen a second time. I guess that's kind of the mentality of extensions for me, is what are the checks that I want to do that I may not do otherwise because they're not very common vulnerability classes, or things that you learn not to do because you have so many false positives hits with it. Like if you do something 100 times, you don't get a result, you tend to stop doing it. But an extension can just do that every time for that 1 in 1,000 chance that it comes up.
Interesting. Do you what about what you mentioned earlier about having Windows, where you're going against a Windows machine versus Linux, you do different approaches, right? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I think the Windows Linux debate is ridiculous. I have a Windows machine on my right and Ubuntu on my left here. I have a KVM switch for it. I have a Mac laptop. There's no better platform than the other. I would caveat that there's some operating systems that are outright bad to use. So Parrot accepts any and all projects, for example, so you don't actually know what's in your operating system. So I'd be pretty hesitant to use something like Parrot OS purely from you don't know what the system is doing. The reason Kali Linux is so popular in pen testing circles is because it's highly vetted. It's very hard to get a tool in Kali, and so you know that you're in somewhat of a quote unquote safe environment. But there's no reason you can't just spin up an Ubuntu and add your tools. You're still on a Debian-based system, and there's also no reason you can't use Linux subsystem for Windows and go about it that way. I think the idea that Windows is bad for hacking was an old thing born from the 90s when it took you 8-9 hours to install Debian, and you wanted to feel rewarded for that by holding it over others. It just
I do not want to go back to the days of having to install anything besides Windows and like just having extra. I had to have extra hard drives so I could unplug one, because I was still like 11, 12 trying to install like some Linux distro, and I was just afraid of losing all my data on my computer, and I lost so much because of it. I kept like doing the wrong partitions, and I would lose everything.
But then there's the even further back, the floppy disks, the stack of floppy disks to install Windows 3.1 and stuff. So,
you're giving up your age, man. We got to step away from this conversation. Let's talk about one of the things that you have been very open about is imposter syndrome. And I also completely relate to it. And I want to hear your take on why you struggle with imposter syndrome and how do you deal with it when it hits you in waves. I feel like, at least for me, it hits me in waves. It comes and goes. How do you deal with it, and why do you feel like an imposter sometimes, especially doing all the great work you have done?
Yeah, I wish I understood fully why I get it so bad. I think part of it is like I was going like 2600 and stuff back in the 90s, and there was these people that were teaching me amazing things. I never felt I could meet that bar. And there's that, like, part of the downside of watching community as closely as I do with GitHub follows and things like that is you see the best of the best. And when you're trying to release something, it kind of makes that hesitation of, well, I don't feel like I'm meeting that bar.
Right.
And so I tend to over polish. I have 7-8 tools now that are slated that I want to release that I haven't released yet, like the DNS brute force and stuff like that. Even like, OX Patrick did a word list creation tool for DNS, and I've got a different way of doing it. But once that was out there, I felt like I couldn't release mine because I was hitting that point of, well, am I adding something new to the conversation? Which I think it does, and I think of that. But then every time I go to release it, I get caught, and I'm like, oh well, I don't want to just be seen to be copying. I think that's probably the biggest thing I'll do that, because I don't want to be seen to be copying. Because you remember the 90s internet was so citation heavy. It's the main thing I'm kind of paranoid about, making sure it's not stepping on someone else's work.
Right. Well, but the thing is, like, outside of like program, do you deal with imposter syndrome when it comes down to just hacking or going to conferences, for example? That's the one that I struggle with, especially with live hacking events. You go into this building of 40, 50 awesome hackers. Everyone's good at different things, but you go in there and you go, well, shit, I don't know half of the things that they all know already, or they're working on already, or I missed the stuff that they found already. Like, how did I not find that? It kind of messes with me a little bit in my head, and going like, I was at the same exact endpoint, the same exact site. How did I miss all of that?
Yeah, I think, yeah. The worst part is like that preamble right before you do a talk at a B-sides or something, when,
Right.
you know, um, I once followed, I don't know if you've ever seen Sarah Yo talk. She's like really, really, really good speaker and
Okay.
very, very engaging. I once followed her at a B-sides Perth talk. And it was one of the like most harrowing experiences because she's like got this really engaging talk and I'm there like, I don't feel like my content is all that interesting. And that's always the point that it hits me, is that right before a presentation, I mean, I'll polish up to the mark. I'll be
Right.
sitting in the audience, changing and chopping things and second guessing it. And um yeah, it's one of the things of doing a commitment to do a talk is you kind of expect that you're gonna have a high bar of time going in. I think I kind of overdo that because I'm constantly in this thought process of second guessing.
Yeah, I think the imposter syndrome hits like the moment your introduction starts, like "Welcome our next speaker," and then that's when
Yeah,
it hits.
oh,
Like,
I hate I hate the introduction part because it just I like the content to speak.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about burnouts? With everything you do, you're a very busy person, man. You have a full time job. You're doing research. You're developing tools. You're helping shape up the community. You do a lot, and I'm sure burnouts or the stress that comes with a lot of this work has a bit of effect on how you operate on a daily day. How do you deal with burnouts, with taking breaks, and how does that work for you?
I think burnout's not so bad for me. So I've worked from home either full or part time since 2003. So I started doing that with online poker, and that taught me to really structure my day.
Okay.
So I think the main thing that kind of keeps burnout from bay for me is I learn when I'm getting burnt out on something and I context switch. So if I'm getting burnt out on GitHub, I'll context switch and go and do something else. So the Pentester Lab giveaway for me was born from that of like, I just want to engage with community right now and I don't want to do it via GitHub. What can I do? And so I did the Pentester Lab giveaway because it gets me reinvigorated to go and do something because there's a lot of activity around it. And then the other side of that, I do work some pretty long days. And so like it's 6 a.m. here now. I usually start at 5, work till breakfast, have time with my family, feed my son, go outside with him for a bit, and then work a bit, have lunch with them. Like burnout, I think, is normally if you're like single task, too long and siloed, that's when you burn out. But if you learn to structure, so you've got a balance of like, I'm going to do family time here. I'm going to do, time where I just don't think about the computer. Like this weekend, I didn't go on the computer too much. I left it alone, which is pretty hard in a lockdown, and there's not a lot to do, but is what it is. But yeah, I think structure and rigor, which kind of is what also allows me to work from home well, makes that less of an issue for me than something like imposter syndrome, where I just don't really have a counter like that to it.
Well, how do you stay motivated then? Like, how does it work when you do bug bounty and you're hunting? What keeps you motivated? Is it just purely the enjoyment of finding vulns, or is it monetary? Is it challenging yourself?
It's definitely not monetary. I think it's community, and like I have a lot of like Slacks with different friend groups and stuff. I get on Discord a lot with other groups. I find like chatting to people that are passionate about it when your passion is low helps kind of jump it back up. Or my routine when I was a pen tester, the first hour of every day, I'd go over Bug Bounty World, I'd go over Sec Talks and places like that, and just answer questions. So if anyone had a question unanswered, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm just going to go through and just answer everyone's questions. If I didn't know it, I'd have to go and learn it. So someone might ask a question about a technology I haven't seen. I'd spend 20 minutes learning about it and post it, and that would get me re-motivated and re-interested in things. And I'd be like, oh, well, cool. I wonder if I can go looking for that. So I think it's, that combination of community and existing friends, and using friends as a, hey, I'm not too motivated for this, but they're really motivated for that. And I'll, go and hunt with them. I've hunted with a whole heap of people on Bug Bounty Forum for that reason, where it's just like a short-term pair up because someone's really passionate at the time and I'm not feeling it, go and pair with someone and you feel that expectation to deliver as well. So
you also do these mentorship things with Bugcrowd's Discord. How does that work, and how did that come up?
So that was that's ironically born from imposter syndrome. I was chatting. I was speaking to Jason Haddix about it a bit. I wanted to stream. I keep going to stream and talking myself out of it, but I wanted to help people. So my thinking was, if I do a one-on-one with someone, I don't have to worry about the broader audience. Like what you're doing here is there's a whole other bar to it, to just having a chat with someone. So I just would grab random people on a Friday, block out a couple of hours, and do a one-on-one with them. And it spun into a whole variety of things. I've helped people who were studying for OSCP build a Recon engine. I've helped people build their Debian Ubuntu environment from the ground up because they wanted a cleaner base. I've helped someone get started with a VPS. And so it kind of, you should never forget what you've learned. And it reminds you how much you know when you mentor someone. And I think it's a good way of reinforcing where you're at and keeping yourself humble, is, constantly doing that kind of thing.
That's very awesome. I really appreciate that investment in the community. It's not an easy thing to do, especially when it comes down to mentoring and having an impact on people's lives. But I want to get that out there. It's very cool that you're doing these mentorship programs and giving somebody your time, your valuable time, when you have a ton of things happening around you and trying to make an impact. So I really appreciate you doing all that stuff for the community as well.
Yeah.
Before we jump on the second part of the interview, which gets a little bit more fun, what to expect from you, man? What is next? Any cool projects you want to work on that you want to mention? Anything you're working with Bugcrowd that you want to mention? People are asking about the Discord. I'll leave a Bugcrowd Discord link right now in the chat in a few minutes. But anything big or anything fun, important, or anything you want to get out that you're working on that you're excited about, that you want to tell the community?
Not particular. I think it's just getting existing projects out. So I really want to get the DNS brute forcer out at some point. At some point, I'm still working out, how much polish that needs and where it needs to go. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'm just gonna keep doing what I do.
Cool. Well, I want to say thank you for doing everything you do. It's been awesome seeing all the stuff that you have done for the community, from Pentester Lab to all your tools. The way I end my interviews is I do a fun, quick questionnaire thing. I ask you some stuff about bug bounties, about your experience with bug bounties, and then I took some notes and keywords of things that you have mentioned, and it's a word game. I give you a word, and you tell me the first one that comes into your mind. Or, it could be a word, it could be a sentence, something super short, whatever pops into your brain, just spit it out.
Sure.
So let's get into it. First bug bounty program you ever hacked on?
Is a private one.
Okay, fair enough.
So I collabed the first time.
Okay, very cool.
Like a lot of people. Yeah.
If you had to hack on one program for the rest of your life, what program would it be? That's a hard one.
That's really hard. Probably Oath, just for scale.
Yeah. Okay. What was your first bounty?
My first bounty is terrible. This is embarrassing. My first bounty was SSL renegotiation. I got paid for an SSL renegotiation once, and I didn't realize how cheesy it was till later. I got $1,200 for that. This is a different generation of bounties. That doesn't apply to today. But yeah, it's a pretty cheesy first payout, but it's something.
Do you remember what you did with your first bounty?
I don't. I kept it all in PayPal for a long time. Okay. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it goes into giveaways and stuff too, so I don't know.
Well, how about this? What was your best purchase you have done with your bounties? Like something that's really memorable, important, had some value to you, or you were proud of, accomplishing it through bug bounties?
So the house that I'm sitting in, largely the deposit.
Wow, very awesome. That's pretty good. That's an awesome. It's awesome, man. Let's see. What is your favorite bug type?
Favorite bug type? Probably NoSQL injection, because it's so misunderstood.
You have a tool for that, right?
Yeah, so I didn't author it, I maintain it. So NoSQL map. I have a second version of it that came up right around the offensive tools debate. So I intentionally held off releasing it amongst all of that, and just haven't CFP'd it anywhere. But at some point I'll release it.
Very cool. Are there any hackers you collaborate with that you want to give a shout out to?
So Hackluke and SML555. Although none of us are really hacking at the moment, it's a lot of history there.
Is there any hackers that you want to collaborate with and you haven't?
Not. I mean, we haven't done anything together. I don't think.
We can make that happen. You said you
Yeah, I
wanted to
mean,
stream, right?
I tend to just ask people at the time. So I'm pretty good at the reach out.
Anyone specific you want to shout out?
Probably Jason Haddix. I'm looking forward to seeing the bug bounting methodology v4.
Okay. Awesome. Is there a favorite tool that you have? If you had to use one tool, you can't say Burp because that's what everybody says. What is your most favorite tool when it comes down to bug bounties and hacking?
I'd say FFuff, as controversial as that is for the stream. So I feel like having a toolkit fuzzing tool is really useful.
To make it very clear, if you're watching this, I don't have anything against FFuff. I have something against people that don't know why FFuff is good. And then try to shove it down my throat. I want to get that out there. Outside of hacking, man, what is your favorite hobby? Do you have anything what are some things you do outside of, for fun or to get your mind off of things? I know you play poker, besides that, or played poker at least.
Yeah, I mean, I still play a bit. It's illegal now, so that makes it a lot harder. That's the whole thing. So it's actually illegal to play online poker in America and Australia. Fun fact. I've done a lot of woodwork and such, just for the instant feedback. So a lot of what we do on computers, you get a bit of a slow burn. You don't always know when you've made a mistake. But if you're building something and you make a mistake, you know about it straight away, which I kind of like that change in process. And I've got a smoker out the back as well. So working from home, I'll often throw a brisket on or something like that. So
that's cool. That's awesome. Let's jump in the second portion. I'm gonna give you a word or two, and you tell me the first one that comes into your mind. And now make it easy with just starting with bug bounties.
The challenge.
Recon.
Understanding.
C++.
Painful.
I like to throw this one out. Jason Haddix.
Mental.
Bugcrowd.
Work.
CEH.
Terrible.
OSCP.
Insightful.
Pentester Lab.
Encouraging.
Poker.
History.
And last but not least, Imposter Syndrome.
Constant.
Well, hey man, I wanted to say I know it's really early for you. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me so early during the day, and taking the time to sit down and telling us everything you do. I really, really appreciate it, and hopefully we can do more of these together sometimes in the future.
Sounds good.
I didn't take any questions for this since we have a little bit of time. Let's open up a few questions. We'll do 3 minutes of questions just because I know people wanted to ask you some stuff. If you have any questions for Codingo, please drop them off right now. By the way, someone asked, is it Codingo or is it Codingo? I don't know how to, the way they wrote it was, is it, let me see, how did you write this? Is it Codingo or is it Codingo?
I mean, it's, as with any handle, it's open to interpretation. But yeah, Codingo is how I tend to say it.
Just quickly going through the questions. I think I was pretty ahead of the questions this time. I don't see anything. I'm going to drop your information for everybody, and I know you just dropped some Pentester Labs. I really appreciate you doing that. Everybody else, if you have questions, you want to keep in touch with Codingo, the information is on the chat. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it will be up here too. Thank you again, man. I really, really appreciate you doing this, and I look forward to seeing all your cool new projects and all your initiatives in the future.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, man. We'll talk soon.
Cheers. Bye.
See you, man. Bye. That was pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. I had a blast in that interview. It's fun hearing people's approach and mentality, honestly. And Codingo is someone that I've always wanted to get a hold of and chat. We've always been in the same city a couple of times, but never been able to really chit chat like this. And get to know each other. So I really appreciate him being on here. And, you know, being 5-6 a.m. in Australia was, you know, a little bit early for him to do this. So I really appreciate him taking the time to get on here and help us out. I think I'm all done with streaming for the day. I'm a little bit tapped out. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to find someone on here that's streaming something related to web or hacking and direct our traffic their way. If you want me to host someone in particular, please drop him a link or drop me a link and we'll go head over there and we will host them and raid them. But outside of that, I'll be back online Tuesday. I'm doing the how to get started in bug bounties thing. So if you want to watch me hack on OWASP Juice Shop, find some vulns, yeah, come join and hang out. We're going to look for some bugs and we're going to post them into HackerOne as a fake program and see where it takes us. So if you want to come and learn and see how I do it, come out here on Tuesday at 9 a.m. my time, PST. I'm in California, so 9 a.m. And VersecCon is on Saturday. So if you want to come and watch all the talks from Jason Haddix, Tom Nom Nom, Stoke, Zishano, Naiden, Benak, Don, let me see if I can get everybody, Chloe, Irby Sam, Ethical Hacker, and I'm missing one. I said Haddix already, right? If I didn't, Haddix. But that's it for me for today. Let's go ahead and raid someone. I think I'm gonna just raid Lena Looks. We haven't raided her for a while. Let's go ahead and raid. And once we hit the raid, if you want to do me a favor and spam, not spam, but drop a bounty please emote in the chat, I'd appreciate it. All right, that's it. Have a good day. Have a good night. Thank you guys so much for all the new follows, all the new subs. I really appreciate you guys supporting me through all this. Stay safe, wash your hands, stay clean, don't get sick, please. And I will see you all on Tuesday. Peace.